Imagine for a moment an impossible encounter in the skies. On one side, one of the most advanced aircraft ever built by humanity, the F-35 Lightning II, a technological marvel of the 21st century filled with stealth systems, advanced sensors, and computer-guided weaponry. On the other side, a World War II fighter, the Messerschmitt Bf 109, a machine that dominated European skies in the hands of experienced Luftwaffe pilots. What would happen if these two aircraft, separated by 8 decades of technological development, met in combat? How long would it take for the F-35 to eliminate its historical adversary? The answer may surprise you, not just because of the brutal difference in capabilities, but because of what this comparison reveals about the evolution of aerial warfare and military technology. Before we dive into this fascinating analysis, I'd like to ask a favor. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us what time you're watching this video. This helps us tremendously to understand our audience and continue bringing quality content to you. To truly understand what we're comparing, we first need to understand each of these aircraft in their historical and technical context. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 wasn't just another World War II fighter. When it entered service in 1937, it represented the state-of-the-art in combat aviation design. Designed by Willy Messerschmitt and his team at Bayerische Flugzeugwerk, the Bf 109 incorporated advanced concepts for its time, including a low-wing monoplane structure, enclosed cockpit, retractable landing gear, and all-metal construction. These characteristics, which we now consider standard, were revolutionary in the 30s, when many air forces still operated wood and fabric biplane structures. The Bf 109's engine, typically a Daimler-Benz DB601 or DB605 in the most common variants, was an inverted V12 liquid-cooled engine that produced between 1,200 and 1,800 horsepower, depending on the variant. This engine propelled the fighter to maximum speeds of about 400 miles per hour in later versions, making it one of the fastest aircraft of its generation. Typical armament consisted of 1 or 2 20mm cannons mounted in the nose or wings, complemented by 2 7.92mm machine guns, synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. Experienced pilots could use this armament with devastating effect, and many of the greatest aces in aviation history flew the Bf 109, including Erich Hartmann, who is credited with 352 aerial victories. The Bf 109's agility was remarkable by the standards of its time. With an impressive rate of climb, approximately 56 feet per second in some variants, it could quickly reach combat altitude. Its turn radius was tight, allowing acrobatic maneuvers in close-range combats known as dogfights. However, the aircraft also had its limitations. The cockpit was narrow and rear visibility was limited. The narrow-track landing gear made landings challenging, especially on improvised fields. And despite its impressive speed for the 40s, the Bf 109 was still fundamentally an aircraft of the piston engine era, limited by the laws of physics and the technology available in the first half of the 20th century. Now, let's advance 8 decades. The F-35 Lightning II isn't just an evolution of previous fighters. It's a complete reinvention of what it means to be a combat aircraft. Developed by Lockheed Martin as part of the Joint Strike Fighter program, the F-35 was designed from the outset to be a multi-role 5th-generation fighter, capable of dominating not only in air-to-air combat, but also in air-to-ground missions, reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and force coordination. There are 3 main variants. The F-35A for conventional takeoff and landing, used by the Air Force. The F-35B with short takeoff and vertical landing capability for the Marine Corps, and the F-35C optimized for Navy carrier operations. The heart of the F-35 isn't just its engine, although the Pratt & Whitney F-135 is a technological marvel in itself, producing over 40,000 pounds of thrust and allowing the aircraft to reach supersonic speeds without using afterburner, a characteristic known as supercruise. The true heart of the F-35 is its integrated sensor system and software architecture. The aircraft is essentially a flying computer with over 8 million lines of code controlling everything from engine management to sensor data processing and weapons firing. The F-35's and APG-81 active electronically scanned array radar can detect, track, and identify multiple targets at hundreds of miles away. But the radar is just one component of the aircraft's sensor fusion system. The F-35 also has the Distributed Aperture System, or DAS, which consists of 6 infrared sensors installed around the fuselage, providing complete spherical coverage. These sensors can detect missile launches, track aircraft by their heat emissions, and even provide the pilot with a 360-degree view, including the ability to see through the cockpit floor. The electro-optical targeting system, or EOTS, adds another layer of sensor capability, allowing precise visual identification of targets at long distances. All these sensors feed into the F-35's data fusion system, which processes the information and presents the pilot with a clear, integrated picture of the battlespace. Instead of needing to monitor multiple displays and interpret raw data, the pilot sees a simplified and intuitive representation of the tactical situation. Threats are automatically identified, prioritized, and tracked. The system even suggests ideal tactics and courses of action. It's like having an extremely intelligent co-pilot who never gets tired and processes information millions of times faster than any human brain. The F-35's stealth technology is another fundamental differentiator. The aircraft was designed from the beginning to minimize its radar signature, using specific angular shapes, radar-absorbent materials, and special coatings. Weapons are carried internally in weapons bays to maintain the clean, stealthy profile. Even the fuel systems and internal structures were optimized to reduce radar reflections. The result is an aircraft with a radar cross-section equivalent to a marble at many frequencies, making it virtually invisible to conventional radars until very short distances. When we talk about armament, the F-35 carries an impressive array of modern weapons. For air-to-air combat, it can carry AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, which are medium-range radar-guided missiles with an effective range of over 60 miles. These missiles are fire and forget, meaning once launched, they track the target independently using their own sensors. The F-35 can also carry AIM-9X Sidewinder short-range missiles, highly maneuverable infrared missiles with lock-on after-launch capability and off-bore sight firing angles up to 90 degrees. For close combat situations, the F-35A has a built-in GAU-22/A 25mm cannon, while the B and C variants can carry an external gun pod. But perhaps the most revolutionary capability of the F-35 is its connectivity. Through Link 16 and other data communication systems, the F-35 can share information instantly with other aircraft, ships, ground troops, and command centers. It can even act as a node in a sensor network, detecting targets for other platforms to fire missiles. This means an F-35 can shoot down a target without ever firing its own weapons, simply by directing a missile launched by another aircraft or ship hundreds of miles away. Now that we've established the capabilities of both aircraft, let's consider the hypothetical scenario. How would this impossible encounter unfold? To make the analysis meaningful, we need to establish some parameters. Let's assume both pilots are experienced and well-trained. The Bf-109 pilot is a World War II veteran with hundreds of flight hours and multiple victories in his record. The F-35 pilot is a modern aviator fully qualified in the weapons system. Let's also assume the encounter occurs in clear skies during the day, starting with both aircraft aware of each other's general presence, but not having initial visual or radar contact. They're separated by approximately 90 miles, an average distance for the beginning of a modern engagement. The first critical factor to consider is detection. Modern aerial warfare is often decided not by agility or raw speed, but by who sees the enemy first and can engage first. In this aspect, the F-35's advantage is overwhelming and absolute. While the Bf-109 depends entirely on the pilot's vision to detect threats, limited by the range of the human eye and the quality of optics available in the 40s, the F-35 has already detected the Messerschmitt the moment both take off. The F-35's and APG-81 radar can detect an aircraft of the Bf-109 size and characteristics at distances exceeding 120 miles. We're not talking about vague or uncertain detection. The system can determine the Bf-109's precise altitude, its speed, direction of flight, and even make a preliminary identification based on the characteristic radar signature of the aircraft. The distributed aperture system adds another layer of detection, capable of identifying the infrared signature of the piston engine at dozens of miles, clearly distinguishing it from the thermal background of the sky and earth. Meanwhile, the Bf-109 pilot has absolutely no awareness of the F-35. The modern aircraft is beyond visual range, obviously, but it's also completely invisible to any sensor the German fighter could hypothetically carry. Even if we equipped the Bf-109 with a World War II-era airborne search radar, something that was never historically done due to weight and power limitations, the F-35's reduced radar cross-section would make detection extremely unlikely until very short distances, perhaps 6 to 9 miles at most, and even then with great difficulty maintaining track. This asymmetry in detection is the most decisive factor in the engagement. In the deadly game of air combat, the F-35 pilot is playing with all cards face up, while the Bf-109 pilot is essentially flying blind. The modern pilot can see everything, can plan his attack with surgical precision, can choose the ideal moment, angle, and weapon. The historical pilot is simply flying on patrol, hoping to visually spot the enemy, completely unaware that he's already in the crosshairs. Let's now consider the engagement phase. The F-35 pilot, after confirming target identification and receiving authorization to engage, has multiple options available. The most likely and tactical choice would be an AIM-120 AMRAAM medium-range missile. This missile is designed to shoot down agile modern aircraft that have sophisticated electronic countermeasures, missile warning systems, and can execute high-speed evasive maneuvers. Against a Bf-109, which has none of these capabilities, the AMRAAM would be absolutely lethal. The procedure would be elegantly simple. From a distance of approximately 50 to 60 miles, well beyond visual range and completely outside the range of any weapon the Bf-109 could carry, the F-35 pilot would select the AMRAAM missile, confirm target lock on radar, and launch. The missile would be ejected from the internal weapons bay, its rocket motor would ignite, and it would accelerate to speeds exceeding Mach 4, or more than 4 times the speed of sound. During most of the flight, the missile would be guided by data link updates from the F-35's radar, keeping it on the optimal trajectory to intercept the moving target. In the final 10 to 12 miles of flight, the AMRAAM's own internal active radar would be activated, taking over final guidance. This small high-frequency radar locks onto the target and guides the missile with extraordinary precision. The Bf-109 would have absolutely no warning. There's no radar warning system to detect the illumination. There's no way to see the missile approaching at hypersonic speeds. The first and only warning would be impact. The AMRAAM uses a high-energy fragmentation warhead weighing about 44 pounds. When it detonates, it creates a destruction pattern designed to shred modern aircraft structures made of advanced alloys and composite materials. Against the aluminum and steel structure of a Bf-109, built to 30 standards, the effect would be absolutely catastrophic. The shockwave alone could tear off the wings. Fragments would perforate the cockpit, engine, and fuel tanks. The historical aircraft would simply disintegrate in the air. From missile launch to impact, how much time would elapse? Let's do the calculations. Assuming an initial distance of 55 miles and an average missile flight speed of Mach 3.5 after the initial boost phase, which equals approximately 2,670 miles per hour, the flight time would be about 1 minute and 15 seconds. During this period, the Bf-109 would continue flying normally, the pilot completely unaware of his situation. He might be admiring the landscape, checking his instruments, thinking about his family or his next meal. And then, without any warning, everything would end. But let's consider variations of this scenario. What if, by some miracle, the Bf-109 pilot visually spotted the F-35? Perhaps there was a sun glint on the canopy or fuselage at a specific angle. Perhaps the F-35 left a contrail in specific atmospheric conditions. Would this change the outcome? The short answer is no, absolutely not. Even with visual awareness of the enemy, the Bf-109 pilot has no means to effectively engage the F-35 at modern combat distances. The Bf-109's cannons and machine guns, however effective they were against World War II targets, have a maximum effective range of approximately 3/4 of a mile, and that's under ideal conditions with a lot of luck. Beyond that, these weapons are ballistic weapons that depend on predicting where the target will be when the projectiles arrive there, considering flight time, gravitational drop, and relative motion. This was already challenging against aircraft of the same era flying at similar speeds. Against an F-35 that can fly at supersonic speeds and execute maneuvers that would generate lethal G-forces for a 30 structure, accurate firing would be simply impossible. Let's imagine the most favorable scenario possible for the Bf-109. Somehow, Through an impossible chain of coincidences, the German fighter manages to close to firing distance on the F-35. Perhaps the F-35 had an unlikely system failure. Perhaps the pilot made a catastrophic error in judgment. Even in this fantastically favorable scenario, the F-35 still has overwhelming advantages. First, the F-35 is simply faster. With a top speed exceeding 1,200 miles per hour, it can easily accelerate out of range of the Bf-109, which maxes out at 400 miles per hour. The modern fighter can literally fly in a straight line away, and the historical fighter would never catch it. Second, the F-35 can execute three-dimensional maneuvers that a Bf-109 can't even attempt. Sustained vertical climbs at speeds that would make the Messerschmitt's piston engine choke and fail. High-speed turns with radii that would break the German fighter's structure. Rolls and post-stall maneuvers that simply weren't possible with 30's aerodynamics. Additionally, the F-35 pilot has complete situational awareness through the helmet-mounted display. He can literally see through the aircraft, observing the Bf-109's position at all times, even if it's directly behind him. The distributed aperture system is constantly tracking the enemy aircraft. The pilot has visual and auditory warnings about threats, distances, approach angles. He can even use the helmet to designate targets for his infrared missiles, simply by looking at the enemy and selecting fire. The AIM-9X missile can then be launched at completely off-boresight angles, up to 90 degrees from the F-35's direction of flight, and still track and destroy the target. Compare this to the Bf-109 pilot, who must visually acquire and track the target through iron sights or a simple reflector gun sight, maneuver his entire aircraft to align the nose with the target, consider deflection, range, and projectile flight time, all while compensating for G-forces and vibration. It's like comparing a modern precision rifle with telescopic sight and ballistic computer against a muzzle-loading musket from the Napoleonic era. But let's take our analysis even further and consider an aspect that's often overlooked in these hypothetical comparisons: the human factor and the psychology of air combat. World War II pilots were, without doubt, men of exceptional courage. They flew aircraft that were dangerous even in normal operations, where mechanical failures were common and where each combat mission had a real probability of being fatal. They did this with minimal protective equipment, without ejection seats, often without reliable parachutes. The psychological stress was immense, and yet they continued flying. However, all the training and experience of a World War II pilot was based on certain assumptions about air combat. They expected to see the enemy. Air combat was visual, intense, a deadly dance where you could see your opponent, assess their intentions, anticipate their maneuvers. There was a certain logic, a structure to combat. You climbed to gain energy advantage. You dove to gain speed. You tried to get behind the enemy in their dead zone. You used the sun to mask your approach. These were the tactics learned through training and experience, passed from veterans to novices. Now imagine the pilot of this Bf-109 in our hypothetical scenario. He's flying on patrol, perhaps on a beautiful morning. The sky is clear, visibility is excellent. He checks his mirrors, scans the horizon, searches for dots that might be enemy aircraft. Everything is normal. And then, without any warning, his aircraft is destroyed. He saw nothing. He heard nothing until the final impact. There was no opportunity to fight, to maneuver, to apply his skills. Just existence and then absence. If he somehow survived and could report what happened, he probably wouldn't have an explanation. An attack from nowhere, from an invisible enemy, using weapons that defy his understanding. This psychological aspect is important because it illustrates not just the technological difference, but the conceptual difference in aerial warfare. Modern air combat occurs in an information domain as much as in the physical domain. Sensors, communications, data processing, information fusion. All of this creates an asymmetry of knowledge that's as lethal as any physical weapon. The F-35 pilot isn't just better equipped, he exists in a different reality, one where the battlefield is transparent, where distances are collapsed by the speed of electronic communications, where decisions can be made with complete information. Now, some might argue that we're being unfair to the Bf-109. After all, we're comparing an aircraft designed for the technological and strategic context of the 30s and 40s with an aircraft that incorporates 8 decades of advances in virtually every relevant aspect. Of course, the F-35 would win. But that's precisely the point of this analysis. We're not trying to diminish the achievements of the Bf-109 or its pilots. We're using this extreme comparison to illustrate how profoundly and fundamentally military technology has transformed the nature of aerial warfare. Consider that the time interval between the Wright Flyer's first flight in 1903 and the Bf-109's entry into service in 1937 was only 34 years. In that brief period, aviation evolved from a fragile experiment that could barely leave the ground to a sophisticated weapon of war capable of reaching speeds of over 370 miles per hour. The pace of change was extraordinary. Now, compare that to the 88 years between the Bf-109's first flight in 1935 and the present. Progress was even more dramatic, but in different dimensions. The evolution wasn't just in speed or maneuverability, although both improved dramatically. It was in entirely new capabilities that didn't exist or were unimaginable in 1935. Radar, computers, guided missiles, jet engines, stealth technology, satellite communications, sensor fusion, electronic warfare. All of this represents not just incremental improvements, but fundamental revolutions in how aerial warfare is conducted. A pilot from 1935 transported to 2025 and placed in an F-35 cockpit wouldn't recognize anything. The very concepts would be alien. This technological progression also raises interesting questions about the future. If the difference between the Bf-109 and the F-35 is so vast, what can we expect in the coming decades? We're already seeing the development of sixth-generation aircraft that promise even more advanced capabilities. We're seeing the increasing integration of artificial intelligence into weapon systems, autonomous drones that can operate independently or in coordinated swarms, directed energy weapon systems like high-power lasers that travel at the speed of light and have essentially unlimited ammunition as long as there's electrical power. It's conceivable that in a few more decades, the idea of a human pilot inside a combat aircraft might seem as antiquated as the Bf-109 seems to us today. We already have drones that can execute complex missions without real-time human intervention. The current limitation isn't technological, but ethical and political. Questions about when and how autonomous systems should be authorized to use lethal force without direct human oversight. But these barriers may eventually fall or be redefined, especially if potential adversaries develop and deploy such systems first. Returning to our specific scenario, let's quantify more precisely the answer to our original question. How long would it take for the F-35 to shoot down the Bf-109? If we consider the time from when the F-35 pilot receives authorization to engage until the target's destruction, and assuming a medium-range engagement with an AMRAAM missile as we described, we're looking at approximately 1.5 minutes. This includes about 15 to 20 seconds for the pilot to confirm engagement parameters, select the weapon, obtain lock, and launch the missile, followed by approximately 1 minute and 15 seconds of missile flight time until impact. 90 seconds. 1.5 minutes. Less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee. In this brief period, an aircraft that represented the pinnacle of technology for its era would be completely destroyed by an aircraft from a different age, using methods its designers couldn't have imagined. The Bf-109 pilot would have no opportunity to demonstrate his skills, no chance to apply the tactics he learned, not even awareness of being in danger until the final moment. But what if we changed the parameters? What if, instead of a medium-range engagement, the F-35 was forced or chose to engage at close visual distances? Perhaps in a scenario where very restrictive rules of engagement required positive visual identification before firing. Would this make the combat more fair? In a word, no. It would just change from completely one-sided to extremely one-sided. In a close combat scenario, the F-35 pilot would still have all the advantages of sensors, situational awareness, and weapons technology. The AIM-9X Sidewinder is an extraordinary short-range weapon. Unlike early infrared missiles that needed to be launched from behind the target aircraft to lock onto the engine's heat signature, the AIM-9X has a high-resolution focal plane sensor that can detect and track aircraft from virtually any angle. It also has impressive maneuverability, capable of pulling over 60 gs in a turn, far beyond what any manned aircraft can withstand. The engagement procedure would be like this. The F-35 pilot simply looks at the Bf-109 through his helmet-mounted display. A target designation box appears over the enemy aircraft in the pilot's view. He hears a missile lock tone indicating the infrared seeker has acquired the target. He presses the fire button. The missile is launched, and even if the F-35 is flying in a completely different direction, the missile uses small thrust vectoring control rockets to turn in the air and fly toward the target. Once its main motor ignites, it accelerates to supersonic speeds and intercepts the target in a few seconds. Total time from lock to impact at close combat distances would be about 5 to 10 seconds. What if the F-35 used its internal cannon? That at least would give the Bf-109 a chance to maneuver defensively, right? Again, not really. The F-35's Ju-22/A 25mm cannon has a rate of fire of 3,300 rounds per minute in short bursts. This means that in a 1-second burst, 55 projectiles are fired. Each projectile is much more powerful than the Bf-109's 7.92mm ammunition, and the cannon is equipped with a sophisticated aiming system that automatically calculates the correct aim point considering relative velocity, distance, angle, and projectile ballistics. More importantly, the F-35 can maintain a favorable firing position much more easily than the Bf-109 could escape from it. The reason is the immense advantage in thrust, energy, and maneuverability. The F-35 has a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1, meaning it can accelerate vertically, something impossible for the Messerschmitt's piston engine. It can execute sustained 9G turns, while the Bf-109 would start having structural problems above 6 or 7 Gs. The F-35's fly-by-wire electronics allow precise maneuvers at the edge of the flight envelope, while the Bf-109 depends on direct mechanical controls that become increasingly heavy and unresponsive at high speed. So, even in gun combat, which is the closest possible form of air combat, the F-35 would maintain complete control of the situation. The Bf-109 pilot could try all the classic evasive maneuvers, high and low-speed scissors, defensive barrels, separation dives, but the F-35 would simply counter each of them with energy to spare. It's like a chess master playing against a beginner, except the beginner is also using pieces from a different game with rules that no longer apply. There's one aspect of this comparison we haven't fully addressed yet: cost and complexity. A single F-35 costs approximately $80 to $100 million, depending on the variant and support package included. That's inflation-adjusted, enormously more expensive than the cost of a Bf-109 in its time. In 2025 dollars, a Bf-109 would cost perhaps a few $1,000,000 if produced today with historical methods. So, on the surface, the F-35 appears to be approximately 30 to 50 times more expensive. Does this mean the Bf-109 offered better value? Obviously not, because capability isn't linear with cost. An F-35 isn't just 30 times better than a Bf-109, it's exponentially better in almost every measurable dimension. It can operate in weather conditions that would keep the Bf-109 on the ground. It can fly missions of much longer duration. It can fulfill multiple roles that would require different specialized aircraft types in World War II. It can coordinate with other forces in ways that simply weren't possible in 1940. And crucially, it has much higher survival rates, meaning the same pilot can fly many more missions, accumulating experience instead of being statistically lost after a few dozen sorties, as was common in World War II. There's also the question of maintenance and support infrastructure. The Bf-109 was relatively simple to maintain by the standards of its time. Trained mechanics could perform most repairs with basic tools and relatively simple replacement parts. The F-35, on the other hand, requires specialized maintenance facilities, sophisticated diagnostic computers, highly trained technicians, and replacement parts that are often manufactured to micron tolerances using exotic materials. One flight hour of an F-35 might require 15 to 20 hours of ground maintenance. For the Bf-109, the ratio was closer to 1 to 5. Does this mean the Bf-109 was more efficient? Again, not when we consider the capabilities. The F-35's maintenance is complex because the aircraft is complex, and it's complex because it's doing things the Bf-109 couldn't do. It's like comparing the maintenance of a smartphone to the maintenance of a 1950s rotary telephone. Yes, the old phone is simpler to fix, but it also only does a fraction of what the smartphone does. This analysis also makes us reflect on the nature of military and technological progress. There's a concept in military studies called revolution in military affairs, or RMA. An RMA occurs when fundamental changes in military technology, doctrine, or organization create decisive advantages that render previous approaches obsolete. The introduction of gunpowder was an RMA. The invention of the steam engine and steel warships was another. The development of nuclear energy and intercontinental ballistic missiles was yet another. What we're seeing in this comparison between the F-35 and the Bf-109 is essentially looking through multiple RMAs. The transition from piston engines to jet engines was an RMA. The introduction of guided missiles was another. The development of radar and then stealth technology was another. Sensor fusion and network-centric warfare probably represent yet another. Each of these revolutions not only improved existing capabilities but fundamentally changed the rules of engagement. An interesting aspect is that the Bf-109 pilot would have some theoretical advantages that aren't usually mentioned in these comparisons. The direct visibility from a World War II fighter cockpit was, in some ways, better than that of some modern fighters. The Bf-109's canopy, although narrow, offered vision without the interference of screens and displays. In an era before radar, this direct visibility was crucial. World War II aces developed an almost supernatural ability to detect small distant dots that might be enemy aircraft, a skill developed through constant training and survival necessity. Additionally, the Bf-109 could operate from much more rudimentary airfields than an F-35. Grass strips, improvised fields, even roads could serve as bases for the German fighter. The F-35, with its sensitive electronics and air intake that needs to be protected from debris, requires prepared runways and significant support infrastructure. In a scenario of prolonged war where military installations have been destroyed, this robustness and simplicity of the Bf-109 could have value. But these advantages are completely irrelevant in the context of actual engagement. Better visibility doesn't matter if you're looking for something that's effectively invisible. The ability to operate from improvised fields doesn't help if you're destroyed before you have a chance to take off or immediately after takeoff, by an adversary you can't detect or engage. It's like having the best sword in the world in a duel against someone with a precision rifle. The sword's advantage in close combat never gets a chance to be relevant. Let's also briefly consider the historical and cultural dimension of this comparison. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 isn't just an aircraft, it's a historical icon. More than 33,000 were produced, making it the most produced fighter in history up to that point. It flew on virtually every front of World War II, from the skies over Britain during the Battle of Britain to the deserts of North Africa, the steppes of Russia, and the Mediterranean. Some of the greatest aces of all time flew this aircraft. It represents a specific era, a particular historical context. The F-35, on the other hand, represents the ambition and technological capability of the early 21st century. It's a program that cost hundreds of billions of dollars to develop, involved thousands of engineers and scientists, incorporates technologies that were science fiction when the Bf-109 last flew. It's designed not for a war that's happening now, but for future wars we hope never to have to fight. It represents a completely different philosophy of air power, one based on precision, information, and technological dominance rather than numbers and attrition. When we place these two aircraft side by side, we're not just comparing machines. We're comparing eras, philosophies, technologies, and ultimately, different ways of thinking about conflict and power. The Bf-109 was designed in an era when it was believed the next war would be decided by large formations of aircraft in epic battles for control of the skies. The F-35 was designed in an era where it's believed future wars will be won by information, precision, and the ability to act inside an adversary's decision cycle before they can respond. There are also lessons here about technological superiority and its relationship to broader military strategy. During World War II, Germany often had technologically superior aircraft, especially late in the war with the Me-262 jet. But technological superiority in individual platforms doesn't automatically translate to strategic victory. Numbers, logistics, industrial production, pilot training, fuel availability, all these factors mattered as much as or more than having the best individual aircraft. In the modern context, the F-35 represents a bet that qualitative superiority can compensate for numbers. An F-35 is designed to be capable of fighting and winning against multiple adversaries simultaneously. Its situational awareness, sensor range, and weapons capability allow it to engage multiple targets before they're aware of its presence. This is a different philosophy from the Soviet approach during the Cold War, which emphasized producing large numbers of less sophisticated but cheaper aircraft. Which approach is correct? The honest answer is that it depends on context. Against technologically inferior adversaries, even older fighters can be effective if employed correctly and in sufficient numbers. But against near-peer adversaries, the capabilities the F-35 offers become decisive. The ability to see first, shoot first, and do so beyond response range fundamentally changes the calculus of air power. Returning one last time to our specific scenario, it's important to emphasize that this analysis is in no way a criticism of the Bf-109's pilots or designers. They worked with the knowledge, technology, and resources available in their time and created an exceptional aircraft by those standards. The pilots who flew it demonstrated extraordinary courage, skill, and dedication. Many paid the ultimate price. The point of this comparison is to illustrate the scale of technological progress and how it has transformed the nature of aerial warfare. 80 years is practically nothing in terms of human history, but in terms of military technology, it represents an almost unimaginable transformation. The rules changed. The concepts changed. The very nature of what it means to be a fighter and fight for control of the air changed fundamentally. And this leads us to speculations about the future. If the difference between 1935 and 2025 is so dramatic, what can we expect for 2075 or 2115? Will we continue to have human pilots in combat aircraft? Will artificial intelligence have progressed to the point where autonomous systems surpass humans not just in reaction time and data processing, but in tactical and strategic decision-making? Will we have developed entirely new technologies, perhaps directed energy weapons that make missiles and projectiles obsolete, or hypersonic systems that move so fast that intercept becomes essentially impossible? It's tempting to think there must be a limit, that there's a natural technological ceiling beyond which we cannot or should not go. But history suggests otherwise. In each generation, people thought they had reached the pinnacle of what was possible, only to be proven wrong by the next generation of innovators. World War I pilots in their wooden biplanes couldn't have imagined the Bf-109. The Bf-109 pilots couldn't have conceived the F-35. And probably we today can't really imagine what will come 50 or 100 years from now. There are important ethical considerations here too. The more sophisticated our weapon systems become, the more we remove the human from the immediate decision loop, the more questions arise about responsibility, proportionality, and the very nature of war. When an autonomous system decides to engage a target, who is responsible if that decision was wrong? The programmer? The commander who authorized the system? The political leader who approved the development? These aren't merely hypothetical questions. We're already seeing autonomous weapons systems being developed and deployed. Air defense systems that can detect, track, and engage enemy missiles without human intervention. Drones that can execute complex missions autonomously. Artificial intelligence algorithms that can analyze intelligence and identify potential targets faster and, some would argue, more precisely than human analysts. The development of the F-35 and similar systems raises questions about the technological arms race as well. When one nation develops a capability like stealth technology or advanced sensor fusion, other nations are essentially forced to respond, either by developing similar technologies, countermeasures, or asymmetric strategies. This creates a dynamic where innovation in weapon systems feeds more innovation, rising costs, and possibly strategic instability. At the same time, one could argue that capabilities like those of the F-35 are stabilizing because they make conventional conflict less attractive to potential adversaries. If a nation knows it would face an overwhelming disadvantage in air combat, it may be less likely to initiate a conflict. This is the logic of deterrence, which has been central to military strategy since the beginning of the nuclear age. Technological superiority isn't just about winning wars, it's about preventing them from starting in the first place. However, there's always the risk that technological superiority leads to overconfidence. History is replete with examples of military forces that believed their technological superiority guaranteed victory, only to discover that adversaries found asymmetric ways to neutralize those advantages. During Vietnam, the United States had enormous technological advantages, but this didn't translate to strategic victory. Technology is a tool, but strategy, political will, cultural understanding, and many other factors matter profoundly as well. When we consider our scenario of the F-35 versus the Bf-109, we're looking at a pure, isolated encounter where only technical capabilities matter. In the real world, war is much more complex. It involves political, economic, cultural, and moral considerations. It involves what happens after combat, how territory is controlled, how populations are governed, how conflicts are eventually resolved. The most capable aircraft in the world doesn't answer these deeper questions. That said, military capability is important. It shapes what's possible, what potential adversaries believe is possible, and how conflicts unfold when they occur. The F-35 represents the current state of the art in combat air power. The Bf-109 represented the state of the art of its era. The comparison between them gives us a concrete measure of how much progress has occurred and, perhaps, a clue to what may come. So, to definitively answer our original question, how long would an F-35 take to shoot down a Bf-109? In purely physical engagement time terms, approximately 90 seconds from missile launch to impact in a medium-range scenario. But this simple numerical answer hides the true answer, which is much deeper. The F-35 wouldn't just shoot down the Bf-109 faster, it would do so in a way that renders the entire concept of combat as understood in the 40s completely obsolete. It wouldn't be a dogfight, it wouldn't be a demonstration of piloting skill, it would simply be the application of sensor superiority and weapons range in a way that the adversary couldn't contest in any way. This is the reality of modern warfare and technological innovation. Changes aren't just incremental, they're transformative. They change not just how we do things, but our fundamental understanding of what's possible. And this process of transformation continues. The F-35 we've discussed today will eventually be as obsolete as the Bf-109 is now. New technologies, new concepts, new threats will emerge. And a new generation of engineers, pilots, and strategists will have to navigate these changes. Finally, this comparison reminds us to be humble. Humble about what we know, humble about what we can predict, humble about our current capabilities. The engineers who designed the Bf-109 were brilliant, working at the edge of their era's knowledge. But they couldn't imagine the F-35. Similarly, we today, with all our knowledge and technology, probably can't truly imagine what will come. And that's a healthy reminder that we should use our current capabilities wisely, always aware that they're just a point in an ongoing journey of discovery and change. May the Lord God guide us to use our knowledge and our technologies not for unnecessary destruction, but for the protection of what is just and for the pursuit of a more peaceful future for all humanity.